there, fellow Ilvermornians. It is time to talk about color work for just a little bit. Knitted color work specifically. And some color theory that might give you some help in figuring out what colors to choose for your project. Also, we'll give you just a few little tips and tricks I have. And at the end of the video, I will show you how I hold my yarn. I've tried lots of different ways and have decided this is the best way for me. Might not be the best way for you, but it is a fast way to go about knitting color work, so that might help you out. So first, let's talk about some picking your colors for your project, because that's kind of where you start. Once you have your project, you need to figure out what colors am I going to use. Now you might go, oh, these two look nice together. Those might be good for my project. But if you look at them, they have a very similar tone. And a way to figure out whether or not they actually are a good choice is to take a black and white picture of them to see how close are they. Will they give you good contrast? Now, if you don't want a lot of contrast, that's fine. But if you're going to do all the work to get a good color work project going, you might as well get some good contrast and get some good bang for your bucks. Another way to kind of, let me kind of make a little barber pole situation going here. A way that I have found is really easy to tell whether or not it has contrast is to barber pole the two yarns that you're planning to use. If they blend together like this, probably not a good choice. If you, these over here together, use, for example, let's try these two. I'm gonna have a big mess by the time it's over with, I have a feeling, because I just piled all these little balls of yarn on my desk, and here we are. Let's say this purple and white, awesome contrast, obviously. And if you barber pole it, you get a nice strong barber pole, and that's what you want to look for in contrast. Now, the best way to kind of narrow down your colors is to look at a color wheel. The best color for contrast are the opposites on the color wheel. So purple and yellow, orange through red, and the blues, greens and purples, particularly my favorite. I love greens and purples together. Actually, I kind of like this whole range through here together, but it's a great way to kind of narrow down what colors you want to use. Let me put these together so I can take black and white pictures of them. I'm going to try to insert them in the appropriate spots. We'll see if that works out. So let's see, looking at the color wheel here, green, did I pull the green out? Green and purple. Super high contrast. See? And then another one would be blue and orange. Super high contrast. Green and blue, purple and orange. And then let's, like, if you had, oh, I do have a teal. If you look at the color wheel, the pink is across from like the bluey teal. Super high contrast. And they look great together. So you can kind of pick colors that way. Or, as I said, you can use the good old barber pole method. Just take your two yarns, screw them together so you have a nice little barber pole going, and you'll know whether or not, and you can really just like pull out a little bit of the end and just twist them together and see if you can see a good distinction, and then that's how you know that there's enough contrast. Another good hint is as you're working, and I will hand these out. I made this handout for a class that I taught at a retreat a long time ago, and it has some good tips. Kind of mostly has the same tips that I'm going over on here. So if you want one of these, I'm happy to share them. But an example is when you get your chart, you always read your chart from left to right and then go over again. Because generally if you're doing color work, it's in the round. So you're doing one round and then another round and then another round. It's hard for me. I'm a very visual learner, and it helps me to have things different colors. I've always done that. I did that with notes going through school, highlight everything different colors. So this is harder for me to read than this one, where I went through and highlighted the dots, which would be the knit stitches in this case. Makes it easier to see. And then tried it here where I highlighted the dots in green and then went in and also colored purple the parts that will be, well, they're all knit stitches actually. The purple, I colored the purple and the green. So if you have multiple colors, I find this very helpful, because then you know which color you're supposed to use at which time, rather than just looking at the symbol and then having to match where in your pattern in the chart you are to what color you're using. You don't even have to think about it if you prepare ahead of time and color in your chart. I find that also very helpful. Don't be afraid to use tools like rulers or sticky notes or anything to cover up your chart as you go. Just move it up one line at a time as you go. I will say I would recommend using sticky notes that you can get up and move, pull back up and move, and that will stay in place rather than a ruler, unless you're going to sit in one spot, because the ruler's wiggly and you might lose where you are. Also, usually what I do is after I finish a row, I put a little check mark, and that way I know that row is done. Or if I don't have it colored in, or if I only have it partially covered in, well, even if I have it this way, I'll take a dark marker sometimes, because I don't trust myself not to have to frog all the time, so I don't want to like just black it out. But I have done that before, just black out that row once you're done with it. I find it's probably a little more sensible just to put a check mark on the side when you're done with that row, just so you know, in case you're using that ruler and it slides, which row you actually are on. I'm warning you because I've been there, done that. Let's see what else have we got in here. I think that's all I have on my little handout. So I'm going to give it a little pause here, and I'm going to come back and show you how I hold my yarn. Alrighty, so I have prepared just a tiny little in the round piece here to show you how I knit in the round. Now, one of the important things to remember when you're knitting in the round, or just making color work in general, is make sure, especially if you're doing it this way, make sure you're always knitting English with the same color and continental with the same color. So normally I am a continental knitter, so I pull my yarn from the left side. So this is the one I'm generally knitting with. I'm putting it over here, and that's how I started. And I knit like this. I hold my tension with my left hand and make my stitches by pulling my yarn through like this, which is called picking, because you're picking your yarn and pulling it through. Picking. And that's generally how I knit. Now for color work, I taught myself how to knit English. So this blue is going to be what we're making our little motif with. And I'm going to bring this in and carry this blue English style. And I find most Americans knit English style. Everybody knits a little bit different, holds their yarn a little different. It is what it is, and it's all good as long as you're getting the stitches. But so I taught myself to knit English so I can hold my, in this instant, blue yarn on, it's a little fiddly to get it going. Give me just a second here. There. I can hold my blue yarn and English it, which is throwing. And then come back and continental knit my beige yarn, which is picking. I am not as quick and proficient at knitting English style as I am knitting continental, but once I kind of get going, it works pretty well. So I'm just gonna pull that back over here. So I have both yarns going at the same time. I'm tensioning my yarn over here like you would as a continental knitter with my left hand, and with my right hand I'm throwing English style. I hope you can see that. Should I get it closer? So knit one beige, knit one blue. Knit one beige and oops, I'll let go of the yarn. You shouldn't let go of the yarn. I mean, you can let go of the yarn, so have to pick it back up. And knit one blue or two blue, whatever. I'm not making a particular pattern. I'm just kind of showing you how I'm moving along here. One of the reasons you want to remember which color you're knitting with which technique is that your tension knitting English and continental can be slightly different. For me, I'm a fairly average tension holder when I knit continental. Like, it's not loose, it's not tight, it's just right, like the porridge. But when I knit English, it tends to be looser, and your stitches will sit differently depending on whether they're tighter or looser. And if you make sure that you always are using the same technique with the same hand, then it's consistent and it's just fine. So here's my tiny little color work. Once again, I hold my yarn continental side with the left hand, English side with the right hand. Now, if you are a thrower, if you just like English regardless, you could put both of your yarns on over on this side and then just throw whichever one it's time for. So let's say we're gonna do two blue, and then we're gonna put the blue down, pick up the beige, do two beige, put down the beige, pick up the blue, and do two blue. Obviously that works just fine. So if you are an English knitter and you're not interested in learning how to do continental and you just want to jump into the color work, not a problem whatsoever. If you're a continental knitter and you don't want to teach yourself English, same thing. So this makes a little bit of a tangle, to be honest. You could totally pick it up, put it down, just like with the English. But I kind of put, before I taught myself how to knit English and continental at the same time, I would hold my yarn like this. So both strands, and then I would just pick whichever one's turn it was. So let's say 2 beige, 2 blue, 2 beige, and let's do 1 more blue. There are also rings you can put on your finger that are made to run the yarn through to keep them separated and not tangled up. I've tried a variety of those and I never could find one that worked for me. Doesn't mean it might not work for you. Ultimately, there are many different ways to do this, and I hope some of the tips and tricks helped. See you guys at Ilvermorny.